Hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining with us today for our third session in the Digital Trust Alliance's webinar series on digital transformation and technologies in digital trust. The theme is building blocks of digital trust. So today we are speaking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Not that complex, I mean a very understandable and comprehensible way which is crafted for a wider audience. And before starting the session and before starting my questions, so I will briefly introduce our distinguished panelists, and I will start with the lady in the house. So we have Ashwini Natesan, who's an independent non-executive director at LB Finance PLC. And also Ashwini is the director at Digital Trust Alliance as well. So he speaks a lot on ethical side of artificial intelligence and other technologies, legal frameworks to build a better and a trusted environment for all of us. Then we have Dhaminda Siriwardena with us. He's the head of software engineering at Zone 24/7, and also he leads the tech forum in Slascom as well. Dhaminda is a well-experienced person in the software engineering field, architecting and crafting and designing different solutions for different industry verticals. Then we have Hansa Perera, who used to be my colleague as well. Hansa is now a principal engineer at Nagarro, and Hansa is a well-recognized person in the Sri Lanka's artificial intelligence and machine learning community. So I'll straight away jump into questions. I'll start from the basics, from very fundamentals of artificial intelligence. So I'll throw a question to all of you, so what do you think about artificial intelligence, and in your own terms, how do you define artificial intelligence? So I'll start with Hansa.
Yeah, thanks, Neranjan. Yeah, it is kind of like the buzzword these days.
Yes.
Every talk, like I heard, like in even in like I'm not like criticizing or like having any uh, issues with this thing, but we are saying even in a Pettikade you talk about AI, right? So that happens, which is really good, and then we have a good industry to make in that sense. But when I talk about AI on the layman side, I think it is mainly about mimicking a human personalization kind of thing with suggested actions, recommendations as what humans do, but not by emotion, not by intuition, but by algorithms. So that is the difference between the human intelligence and the artificial intelligence. So if I combine all these ideas, it would be like mimicking how a person would take a decision and an action based on what experiences he can see, or even the experiences that have not been seen through kind of a set of actions. Because I use a word called algorithms. So algorithms is again a technical term. So if you consider about algorithm, it is a set of actions that curated with respect to given set of patterns and all that you follow. And then out of that, you are going to have an output which should be supportive to take some action. So that is where the artificial intelligence in the technical term going to be. But right now, it seems like it is going to use in many areas. When you don't have a word, you use AI. But when you very simply, it is not a word that you can use it everywhere, because we are talking about some intelligence that is like a human who is capable of taking decisions, which is very critical in the sense of taking a decision, right? We have seen few scenarios where auto decision making, how it would be critical, right? And then during the plane crash that happened few weeks back, if we had an automatic decision making system, due to the seat failure, might have uh, stopped this incident. But it was a human level decision, so he with emotion that decision was taken. So that is why we had to have that sort of a incident at that time. But at the same time, there are scenarios where like we see even like I'm going to take an example from the auto car kind of thing. You may have seen a video where the car has to take a decision whether to avoid a pedestrian or whether to avoid a car knocking it. So it is also taking a decision that not to take uh, uh, the accident on the human side, but the accident on the other side. So those are kind of like mimicking the human level uh, decision making and understanding the scenarios and then taking the decision, which are good things. There can be wrong things as well, that can happen, but it is our responsibility as the industrial professionals training these AIs not to be on the wrong side, but to be on the human side always. Yeah. So that is what I think on the AI aspect. So I'm very optimistic about AI is going to support us in many ways.
Nice answer. So one funny thing you mentioned is that when you don't have any other words to use, you use AI. I mean, when you want to make others feel that a system is magical or very complex and advanced, you use the word AI. So thanks, answer. So then, Ashwini, what do you think of AI in your own terms? Define AI, maybe from your background or maybe from the ethical side. How do you see it?
So before we go into the ethical side, I must say it's a very interesting discussion to kick off because I'm extremely passionate about my work in technology law, particularly AI and how it will influence our lives and what kind of ethical frameworks and legal frameworks we must have. So I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah.
And good evening to everyone who's joined. So what is AI? And so I asked AI about this. So I had a conversation with AI several months ago on what really the generative AI thought what AI was. And the answer it gave was very simple. And I thought it really struck with me. It said, what AI is the way in which we perceive humans to be. So what it thinks is AI itself thinks it is a simple way to think, learn, and decide like humans. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But of course, while humans use brains, AI uses data and algorithm to do that. And for me, when it comes to AI, I would call it the AI triad. And I would say, most importantly, it would come from data, algorithms, and compute, the power to compute. All of this joined together to form the AI triad. Now, when it comes to ethical frameworks of AI and the necessity for that, that's definitely an important one. And many a times I'm asked this question about why are we talking about ethics before we fully, grapple with the technology? And my answer is they're very wrong in assuming that AI is something for the distant future because we are already deploying AI systems. May not be at a scale, at least in certain parts of Sri Lanka, but having said that, we do have AI applications, for instance, when it comes to finance, for instance, when it comes to credit scoring, all of this AI is already being used. So there is already use, and there must be certainly thought about ethical frameworks and also about the legal frameworks. And another issue with regulation is it never keeps up with technology. So if you're going to wait for the regulation to come, it'll actually be too late in the day, which is why we have to look at ethical frameworks currently, even without a legislation in place. For example, in South Asian countries, including in Sri Lanka. So my view is it's certainly the right time. We are not early. And at the same time, we don't have to wait for a law in terms of a legislation, a statutory requirement to make these ethical frameworks work in our context.
Thanks, Ashwini. Thank you very much for giving that explanation. Dhaminda, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Ranjan, and thank you for the invite as well. So AI sounds quite a complex set of words, but if you look at the human evolution, right, from the Stone Age, when we started, I believe the Stone Age man would have kind of taken the stone or the sticks being a very advanced tool. So we kind of evolved through time and we have come to the current state. And artificial intelligence, I mean, which we have been talking about ages ago. I mean, there was so much of sci-fi movies to all that we have seen on artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is being used as a tool for us, for the human being. So the human revolution is happening, or the technology revolution is happening to the next phase, from the industrial revolutions to the next one. So while all that is well and good, some people are being very scared about it, because it looks like the AI might take their jobs away, the normal human jobs. But thing is, what I see is AI is a tool where it will bring the people or the human being to the next level. We might not do certain mundane tasks, but our AI agents might do stuff. Like, for instance, nowadays, ChatGPT or one of the agents that are out there is like a tool that most of the people use. I mean, especially students learning, probably in the workplaces, to get their work done in a quite a short, a quick fashion. So AI is getting into everybody's lives. But like the other two panelists mentioned, it has the good and the bad. The good is it will help us. It will help us get to the next level. We be more advanced in ourselves. We might be able to focus on other areas, which are probably the medical research to all that, which with the help of AI tools, definitely. But on the other side, there is a certain challenge that will come up: the cyber terrorism, wrongdoing of or wrong training of AI tools, people infiltrating into data and giving the wrong information. So there are two sides to it, the good and the bad. We'll focus on the good, definitely, but we have to be aware of the bad, the regulations, the controls, all that will have to come in probably in the near future, not in the long term. This thing. So, like Ashwini mentioned, it has to be done as soon as possible. So, all in all, AI is a tool for us. I don't think we have to be afraid of it, but we should tame it so that it becomes a slave for us, and we not being a slave of AI.
Thanks, Natesan. Yes, definitely AI is a tool for us. I mean, like we all have heard the statement saying that AI will not replace you, but the person who's using AI will replace you. And so I think it's almost everyone knows of it right now. But the thing is now, since we had the very early discussions of what AI is, so I remember this Turing test, which says that you have a person at one end and you have a machine with a sophisticated algorithm at one end, and you ask the same questions from both the person and the machine. And if you can't distinguish between the answers, then that machine is actually capable of AI. I think we are now way past the situation, so we can't actually distinguish between any of the answers that ChatGPT or any other AI tool gives. Okay, thanks guys for the wonderful round of introductions into the subject. So let's get down to business. So Hansa, so I think when it comes to AI, there are two major words that we would like to get an explanation on: supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning, to start things off with, because a lot of people don't understand the difference between these two buzzwords. So what is supervised machine learning and what is unsupervised machine learning? And can you please explain?
Yeah, sure. That's good to know, like the components in the AI part. So, but AI, and then you have a word now coming in as machine learning. So I'd like to explain the word machine learning as well. So machine learning is where, like, so we were talking about how this personal human level understanding is going to take over by a machine. That is what we need. That is what we are doing with computer algorithms and all, as Ashwini mentioned and Dhaminda mentioned. So it is kind of like three-way thing. One, you have algorithm, one you have data, the other one you need to have a computing aspect. But how you can do it in a way that it is repeatedly happening. So that is where the machine learning part comes in, so that it is going to learn the patterns, how to identify the changes that is going to happen, and then predict with respect to the requirement that would be there. So that is where the machine learning part comes in. So when you are going to do that, there are two ways that you can do very easily, where you can be given a objective and then try to identify the patterns of those objectives. So let's say like we are talking about whether it is going to rain tomorrow or not, but we can take the last 100 years of data for Sri Lanka, for a given region as well, which we have in our med department, which I have personally used for different scenarios. Like if you take from April 13 to there is like 45 days in difference, like 5 to 6 days difference. We always have a huge flood going on. This time we didn't have it. So when you don't have it, it basically goes to the October month. So that is what happens in the past based on the data. So very simply, I was trying to explain whether it is going to rain or not. So we have past data, the days that the rain has happened. We have the past data that the rain has not happened. So based on that, with respect to humidity, temperature, and then the wind patterns and everything, so we can predict whether it is going to rain or not in a much higher manner. So from our school times, we were learning predicting when you flip a coin, you get a head or tail, right? So we've been focused to, and then we've been taught to think about that. Always it is going to be 0.5 when you have head, either you have head or tail. So the probability is 0.5. But if you know where the tip, where the how many times the coin has flipped, whether it is what is the gravitational potential of the environment, and then the friction, temperature. So those kind of variables, if you have, then you can actually predict whether you are going to have a head or tail in a much higher probability. So that is what we call as, like, because we know what has happened past, and then we are trying to predict it. We have the objective to identify a given event. So I was talking about just two events. You can have multiple events. So that is where the supervised learning part comes in. And especially scenarios like anomaly detection kind of scenarios, you cannot say that, okay, this is anomaly, this is the normal level. You cannot say that because anomalies are really ad hoc. So in that sense, you might not be able to do a supervised learning scenario. In that sense, you should be able to identify slight changes that have happened during the time period. So based on the data that you have. So in that sense, you cannot supervise. So then what happens is you becomes unsupervised. So unsupervised means you are not even providing any information about a given objective, but you are giving an objective, try to find a pattern and an anti-pattern. So it is going to identify a pattern as well as anti-pattern that is going to be, so that it would be able to identify without having even historical records or even with the historical records. So when you have historical records with you, you can basically do the unsupervised learning much accurately. So that is where we were using as conventional AI algorithms. But right now we are talking about generative AI algorithms. In that, what happens is you don't need a historical pattern. You can also mimic what is going to happen in the next based on the pattern that you have, and then check when the event has happened whether it is similar following the pattern or it is not following the pattern. So that is how the unsupervised part comes into the world. And then so one such big scenario when people are using unsupervised learning is on the anomaly detection as well as on the customer segmentation. People are using clustering kind of segmentation techniques so that you don't know how many clusters are going to be. So that algorithm is going to identify what would be the most probable optimized segments that you can have. So that is how supervised and unsupervised learning can be explained in a layman terms. We can discuss more. But yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Hansa. I think so now with the supervised machine learning, you mostly used label data. categorize data, and with unsupervised machine learning, most of the data is unlabeled because without categorization. And also, like, we use the word learning. So our audience might, without any technical jargon, in very simple terms, our audience might want to know, how do these machines actually learn? So what's the process they follow? I mean, we know how we learn. We read books, we watch videos, we listen to people, we memorize certain things. But how do these machines actually learn? I mean, in very simple terms, can you explain?
Okay, so the learning for a machine can happen in different ways. So very simply, on the technical side, we can get a training data set, and then let's say we have a label data. So let's say I'm starting from a very simple example, like 1,000 data points are there. So out of the 1,000 data points, let's say 800 data points are saying there is not going to be rain tomorrow, and 200 data points are going to be saying there can be rain tomorrow. I mean, based on the historical data that is going to happen. So you have the label, and then so these labels are not just a single variable. You can have the temperature, humidity, wind pattern, the region. So those type of different set of variables would be there. So likewise, you have 800 data points with 5 variables, let's say, saying it is not going to rain. With 5 variables, another 200 records are saying there is a possibility of rain. So now what happens with the algorithms is like you can talk about a decision tree very simply. So what happens is you just need to identify a data point and identify whether it goes to a left side or the right side, right? So very simply, you can start from that. So if let's say the humidity is above this value, you can say it is not going to rain. If it is less than that, it goes to your right node of the tree itself. Like I'm saying, a binary, two-way differentiation, rain or not rain. So likewise, that is one way. And then when you do it for several iterations, you can get a good idea about how things would happen. But that is just a single tree, right? So from a single tree, you can identify some things. But how about if you have set of trees, which is we call this as the forest, right? So many trees, consider it as a forest. So one tree, you might not be able to pick up the biasness that is going to be, I mean, like it would be biased because you are giving the terms and values and all. But what happens with the when you have many things, and then you can think about in a democratic manner, right? So multiple things, many things that if one type of a pattern is going to give in a multiple ways the same answer, then you can think about, okay, this is the pattern that you need to pick up. So that is how a machine learn on a pattern very simply, right? I'm talking about a supervised learning kind of a scenario. We can also think about a seasonal pattern, right? So let's say like we know sales going to be high every December, starting from November onwards. People starting from Black Friday up to January 15th, we have a five, right? And then it goes down a lot. And then I'm talking about Sri Lankan context. Again, it goes up at April. So we can see a pattern going on. And then that pattern has an interval also. So what we can do is we can keep that interval and the pattern that goes up and then overlaps with the existing data that is going to happen so that we can identify what would be the scenario for this. So machine is going to understand what exactly the interval and what exactly the height of the value that has been gone. So we give different things like we can identify average, we can identify max and minimum, we can identify the variance of a given average point. So those are some of the statistics that we can use to machine to say that, okay, keep this pattern with you with these variables, with these parameters. So that machine knows, okay, these are the things that I need to look for. It would look for those type of things in the given data set, keep it in the memory. And then next time when a new data set comes in, it tries to edit and then say, okay, this pattern is following, this is the pattern that I am seeing. So therefore you will have this type of a output. So that is what I would say machine learns on a quantification aspect of time series kind of thing.
Thank you very much for the detailed explanation. Right. So, Dhaminda, my next question is to you. So, you are coming from a software engineering background, and you are part of a big organization which develops large scale applications for multinational companies and for global organizations. And from a Sri Lankan perspective, how well do you think that Sri Lankan private sector is adapting artificial intelligence and incorporating that into their software development process and within their applications? And that maybe you can give us some examples of AI being incorporated in some of the applications in Sri Lanka. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, Neranjan. So I believe there are quite a few companies, especially in the financial sector, they are using a lot of AI technologies. I heard, I don't have experience, hands-on experience with most of them, but what I kind of read and heard is that there are a lot of decision making that is being done using AI agents. Like for instance, these approval processes, evaluating a customer, what you call profiling customers for banks based on information that's available. So these are taken into their workflow process to enhance or shorten the time taken for the turnaround time. So example is some of those loan processing. I hear that some of the loan processing process workflows are kind of made efficient by using AI agents. There are other areas where, again, on the financial side, because the information that a bank or a financial institute may have from their customer base, they can do a lot of stuff, make decisions based on the past transactions, overdues to defaulting to all those things. So those information they use to make very intelligent decisions, whether to go ahead with a loan or whether to kind of give a facility or to certain things. So I believe that the companies are adapting AI technology-based solutions, and it's on the rise. I guess probably in a year's time, quite a few of these companies will be using it in a good manner.
Yeah, so Dhaminda, so I'll throw a follow-up question as well. Now, when you are developing an application and incorporating artificial intelligence into that application, so one of the most important things is choosing the right AI model, and also choosing integrating ML ops into the software development process. So in software development practice, maybe in your engineering teams as well, how do you approach this process? How do you choose the right ML ops approach, and how do you choose the right AI model? How do you do that in practical scenarios?
Yeah, so I think I take from where Hansa gave a very good explanation of what ML is. So there are ML models that one would kind of develop or get it from available sources, right? ML models are good as it is, but if you don't really kind of train them and fine tune them, they're useless.
Yeah,
the useless in the sense because you can have hundreds of them thinking that they would do whatever that you intend to do, but they might not kind of deliver it. So there is this concept called the ML ops that has come in, where these models are kind of generated. I mean, the data scientists analyze the data. I think Hansa gave a very good detailed explanation of how the whole thing works. So the analysts kind of give it to the ML engineers, and the ML engineers will kind of select or work on the models, come up with the models, and the models are deployed to the client side. The client may be a bank processing the customer's profiles to figure out whether the customer is eligible for a loan or a facility or whatever. But then there are certain changes that might happen as it goes on. It might be environmental changes, economical changes, all that happens as we go on. So when those things happen, the ML models has to be fine-tuned and retrained. So that's a continuous process that has to go in. So this ML ops kind of gives the ability to do that in a more automated fashion, because otherwise, what's the point of having AI agents and the human beings kind of looking after it? It's a lot of work, right? So here we are looking at efficiency, bringing efficiency and get things done in a seamless manner. So in order to do that, MLOps is a process that has come. I mean, in the software engineering, there's DevOps process where the software is deployed into production to whatever environments, where it's automated. But in the ML side, it's much more advanced than DevOps, where the process is managed through the MLOps operation. So these are some of the areas. So it's a very high level thing that I try to keep it as easy as possible and understandable.
So you said that even if you choose the right ML model, if it's not properly trained, the ML model is actually useless. So I think even if you even if you we know smart kids, but if the smart kid is not properly educated and not trained and everything, then that kid will not be able to achieve anything. I mean, that's the basic thing with the ML models as well, whether it's properly developed or whether the application algorithm is sophisticated. But if the training is not there and the data quality is not there, then basically that model will become useless. So I will go into a different aspect of artificial intelligence. So Ashwini, so now I think there are a lot of regulations coming up with respect to new technologies and also with respect to AI as well. But so even without these laws and everything, why is it really important to have proper ethical and legal frameworks, even, I mean, well in advance? Why is it important to have these frameworks from an ethical and legal perspective? I mean, especially with AI.
Sure, thank you. And like I previously mentioned, we are already using artificial intelligence for various purposes. So even if we take only a Sri Lankan context, be it in the finance sector or be it in health sector, AI is being used. And also in hiring, I know of certain HR companies which may not be in a wide scale, but they still use AI-based technologies to shortlist CVs and to also consider placements. So all of these are important uses, and all of these affects the rights of people. So yes, whenever there is an approach that is being taken that has an impact on the lives and rights of people, certainly there has to be a framework through which it can function. And there's something, and I'd like to draw a parallel to social media regulation. I know a lot of people now know of social media regulation, but this was not being talked about a decade ago. And when discussions are happening now, everybody has a problem with it, saying that we let it be without regulation for a very long time. And that is the issue with the many evils that they believe that the social media is perpetrating. In the sense of AI, the harms can be much, much quicker. It would not have the gestation period that we saw with social media because of the level of uptake already. In a very, very simple example, I am quite confident that all of us in this meeting also, and all of them who will be watching this recording later on, would have certainly at least used ChatGPT, Gemini, or DeepSeek once. Or and I would go on to the extent to say that they would use it at least once every single day. So right now it's an integral part of our lives and our work lives as well, and which is why it's extremely important to consider ethical frameworks. For example, in the education sector and for students in schools and in colleges, assessment patterns have to be considered, because right now with AI, a lot of the previously thought about assessments may no longer be useful because it can be done in a matter of seconds or minutes. So considering these aspects, we certainly must think about ethical frameworks. But you also mentioned that there are several of these ethical frameworks. We also have other such governance mechanisms. They are all in existence, but what about adoption of it? So if you see the EU, there is already an EU AI Act. So they do have a legislation, so to speak, there. But there are also other countries which are looking at legislation. But not all countries need to take legislation route, I believe. There can also be equally efficient and also mechanisms through which this can be regulated. And one example can be through ethical frameworks. One other example can also be through assessment of models. I know the other two speakers spoke about AI models, assessments for AI models, audits. All of this can still work very well in the framework that we are currently in. And it must also be remembered that when it comes to a Sri Lankan context, it's not about quickly rushing to any kind of regulation. It's about seeing what really is the necessity from a local perspective. And then for that reason, for those of you who have not already read, I would highly recommend looking at the National AI Strategy of Sri Lanka, which I think is very forward looking. And time and again speaks about AI governance. And it also talks about ethical implementation of AI in several paragraphs of the strategy itself. And including in the white paper which preceded the AI strategy, there was a lot of mention of the necessity of having an ethical framework, the necessity of having these regulations for use of AI. So I think in more ways than one, Sri Lanka is already looking at it. We do have an AI strategy to prove it. But at the same time, we must also be mindful of the fact that how are we going to regulate it and in what way will it be effective? And it need not necessarily be only through legislation. That's my point of view.
Yeah, Ashwini, I'll throw a few follow-up questions to you as well. Now, so from a global perspective, how advanced do you think these ethical frameworks are? I mean, maybe if you can provide us some examples and elaborate on things like EU AI Act as well, and there are new frameworks like OECD framework we can adapt. So can you enlighten us on some of these things from a global perspective for to our users be aware of?
Sure. So the EU AI Act is it's a regulation, which means in the EU scale. So it's actually like a law. Like in our context, how we think of legislation, that's how you have to think about an EU AI Act. But it is applicable to the entirety of the EU, which means the EU member countries will have their own respective national laws that would make sure that they comply with the EU AI Act, because that is one that is common to the entire region. Now, that is very important because we are talking about an entire region coming within the framework of an EU AI Act. And I can give one simple example, which many people may or may not know, and that is the EU GDPR. It's called the General Data Protection Regulation. Now, that came into force in 2018. And before that as well, the EU has had several data protection types of directives. Several member countries have had their own laws, but this was common to the entirety of the EU. And it was also at that time the first of its kind to have such detailed and comprehensive regulations relating to data protection. What it did was it caused this kind of what we call as a Brussels effect, which means that many countries which did not have a data protection legislation decided to adopt the GDPR, EU GDPR model to frame their own data protection legislations. And one example that we all know of is Sri Lanka, which also has the EU GDPR blueprint when it comes to its Personal Data Protection Act. So now the question is, will the EU AI Act also set such a standard for many other countries? Well, unlike for data protection for AI, it's not very simple to simply adopt the existing sort of model that the EU has. One, because the EU is able to ask for certain requirements that many smaller countries may not be able to in terms of transparency and requirements. What it does is it basically divides or classifies AI systems based on risk. It can be high risk, low risk, etc. So based on that, there is a governance model. And I think that's a very important step to take. But I don't believe that it should be the standard for all countries, because we have to look at our own requirements and our own local realities before we simply adopt what is in existence. And one example that was constantly mentioned was whether the Brussels effect of the data protection regulation will flow over to that of the EU AI Act. So far, there has not been too many examples to suggest that. Brazil, which is also considering its own law, initially had a version that was quite similar to the EU AI Act, but it has gone through substantial changes in the last few months as well. And another example is South Korea has its own version, not typically the one that necessarily apes what the EU AI Act does. So I don't believe that there is one global standard in terms of what the EU AI Act is done, but it's also too early in the day. Many countries are waiting and seeing. So they use the wait and see approach to see how it will be implemented, before which they can adopt a similar framework in their own countries. But that's not to say it's not being considered. The US has its own state level laws that it looks at. Your second part of the question was on ethical framework. So yes, you have several ethical frameworks that we can look at. It can be the OECD, it can be the UN one. All of this can be good for us to consider as a starting point. When we don't have any other framework, these can be good ethical frameworks. And in Sri Lanka, we already have a really good starting point in the form of the National AI Strategy. And the National AI Strategy actually, in its executive summary itself, makes a mention of all of these ethical standards. It talks about assimilating all of these, and then coming up with a process through which will be more suitable to what Sri Lanka can be doing.
Yeah.
So I would say that we already have a system in place through a strategy, but it now remains to be seen how we are going to operationalize it. And of course, in the upcoming questions, I can say more about what really the strategy is and what are the aspects that we can use as companies and as entities who are using AI or using AI models to make decisions.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll ask one more question from you to set the context for our next questions to Dhaminda and Hansa. So I think all these regulations, ethical frameworks, different act are there to prevent bad things from happening. So since we are talking about digital trust, and so what are these bad things that could happen? What are the risks of AI that we are trying to prevent using these ethical frameworks and different regulations and acts? So can you explain those things?
Thank you. That's a great question, because everybody will wonder that we are talking so much about the risks, but what are really the risks? I'll start with one that's really simple, in the sense that I know a lot of people talk about it, and it's quite straightforward. The first is of bias and discrimination. And I'll just take a minute to say why it's important. See, if you look at AI bias, I definitely do not like the term AI bias, because AI in itself is not biased. It is the bias that the humans have through the training data that gets translated to that of AI. And when we look at training data sets, for example, when it's being looked at for hiring people for certain jobs, if by training itself and if by experience it is seen that women and persons from certain minorities are excluded for certain positions, or members from the LGBTQ community are being excluded, AI is naturally going to take the same set of biases and also reject these candidates for the very same reason. It's not going to be any different. So in that sense, bias and discrimination, although spoken a lot about and quite straightforward, is a real risk that cannot be forgotten. And in the sectors that we are using, it can be through finance, it can be through HR. This is a real concern that should not be ignored. The other one is, of course, of data misuse. See, because when we look at AI, it has to have data. How is this data obtained? Is it being obtained after compliance with the required laws? And usually the answer is, oh, this is just publicly available data that we are using. Just because it is publicly available data, it doesn't mean that there are no legal requirements that you have to comply to use them. So that is something that I would definitely ask entities to be mindful of. And the next one is, it used to be referred to as the AI black box, but a lot of people don't like that term, because they say that's not accurate, in the sense that there is a lot of explainability that we can associate with AI, especially in the discussions in the held in the last couple of years. Even so, are we able to explain the decisions that the AI makes? If suppose a person has not been given a personal loan for any reason, is rejected, and if the person is wants to sue the entity to court, is it explainable as to why that decision was being taken? That is something we need to also consider from the point of view of explainability of AI. Another real risk. It's not something that's imaginary and far-fetched. And also, I also certainly believe that transparency when it comes to AI systems is very crucial from a reputational angle. There's definitely going to be reputation erosion when there is AI that is being misused or AI that's being used without understanding its repercussions and its consequences. So I think these are some of the basic risks. And when we look at now all of this, we are looking at from the standpoint of narrow AI, the AI that does what we expect it to do. But as AI gets more and more advanced, the risks will also multiply. It can be through AI general intelligence, specifically to AI super intelligence. Then the existential crisis and all of that becomes a reality. And it's no longer just what we look at in fiction. So I think those aspects should also be considered when it comes to narrow AI as well as AGI. But we have to bear in mind that how we use these systems and how they are being deployed are all concerns. But at the first set itself, at the first go itself, please be aware that when you're building it, you have to have these ethical frameworks in place, as opposed to thinking about it whilst deploying or afterwards as an afterfact. These should be looked at and remedied at its inception.
Thanks, Ashwini. I think you covered a very broad scope of different ethical and trust-related issues that AI developments can have. So I'll set that as the context for our next questions to Hansa and Dhaminda. So, Hansa, with what Ashwini mentioned about different issues from ethical perspective, privacy perspective, trust perspective, transparency perspective, and also what Dhaminda mentioned about choosing the right model and training the model properly, quality of the model, quality of the data, etc. So, when it comes to actual software development, and when it comes to actual real world scenarios, so what are the common mistakes that people do when it comes to AI development and building different applications using AI?
Yeah, very valid and a timely question, Ranjan. So, like whatever we say that AI is going to take over or anything, right? So only 4% of AI projects are actually success and going into production. So it is good that 96% are failing because we have our jobs secured. But anyways, 80% of those 96 projects, right, are 96% failing. 80% of those projects don't have a proper requirement. So they just try to go with the tide and then try to build up. So no proper use case or a requirement or a objective to be validly identified once after you have a model. So one fails when you don't know what to measure, how to measure the accuracy. That is the bigger worry. So better to deal with, like, so IT teams going to utilize AI and then try to come up with a model. But when the IT team from a bank try to build up a model and try to give it to a credit card management team or a default customer targeting team, they are saying another set of things. So no proper requirement gathering and then no proper actioning part is decided. So that is one problem why it is failing on the practical aspect. On the technical aspect, the data quality is a bigger issue. And then before starting a model development, you should have an understanding about whether your data is feasible to do that. So when you are giving it to a service vendor, they would say, yes, I can do, but they don't know the exact business problem, even though they are in the domain itself, because even though it is domain specific, but industry has their own ways of collecting data. That is one way. The quality of the data is another problem. The third one comes in, like, these data are not like in silos. So you can do the POC very well, right? So POC means a proof of concept. You can do it much faster, very nicely. You can show a very high accuracy, and then yeah, POC is done. But when it comes to the real development and then put it into the production, so those siloed data are not going to come in the streamlined manner. So what happens is your project stops at that point until those streamlined projects are coming, because if you are a external service vendor, you cannot touch into the data point. So that is another problem that most of this, like out of that 96%, most of the 80% of those projects are failing because of those major three reasons. The other one is people think when you have an AI model, you should have an accuracy about 95%, 98%. Now, that is not going to happen at once. So it would take at least 6 months. This is an evolving kind of a thing. So it is not like a software application where you gather the requirements, you build it up, you have the perfect UIs, smooth workable workflows that is going to be there. It is not like that, because this is a journey kind of a scenario. So it takes like 4 to 6 months to mature a data science model. So you should have to have that patience also. So if you think like within 1 quarter you need to throw away, that is totally a waste of your amount of money that you invest, and then the team's effort as well. It would at least take 4 to 6 months to mature this type of a product, at least a very small use case. Right? So it depends on retail kind of a scenario. It would take like 8 to 12 months because it is a seasonal kind of a scenario as well. So those are like out of many. So those are the 5 things that I see right now. If we can think about those things, so the how to rectify is like a top to bottom approach, starting from a strategy, then a vision, and then requirements. Then comes up the monitoring aspect, uh, how to uh, uh, how to identify the ROI, and then for that ROI to be achieved within shorter period of time, what type of a model that you can build, and then people like us can come and build the model. So that is how I see to make that how that 4% get success is because of that.
Yeah. And I think, Hansa, one mistake that some of our developers are doing is that they because they don't identify the requirement properly, they just take a model which is out there and they use it without proper comprehension, or they just try to build a model from the scratch when they actually can use a model which is out there. And yeah, so I think those are some mistakes people do as well. And so let's say, Hansa, we follow everything and, the model is properly built, now it's trained and everything. But when it comes to actual deployment, production environment, so how do we really know that the model is actually working? I mean, what are the different approaches or mechanisms that we can use to test how this model is working? And
So it depends on the business that you are working on, right? So let's say it is a very fast changing business. You start off last year and then you are trying to build it up on this year. Totally, the model has been now like kind of redundant because the whole pattern has changed, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, your model, the team who are working on should be very smart enough to identify the real data always, rather than picking up a historical data and show the accuracy. So that is one part, the change in the data. Change in the model is also going to happen. So that means people are not looking at the model drifting that could happen, right? So it can happen on like from the managerial perspective 4 ways. Like it can be a social, technological, right? So it can be economical or a political kind of a scenario, right? So in that sense, we should be aware of like someone from outside, maybe a product manager, someone should identify these changes, and we need to think about how this model drift can be sorted out because of the social or cultural changes that is going to happen, or because of the business operations that is going to happen. So that is another way that we can be very smart enough in order to get rid of these type of problems that is going to come. And talking about another scenario, which is kind of like very hardly seen, but no one gets a lot of attention on this one, is like you think your model is going to work properly because your data and everything, but you have not tested the waters of the outside world. So that is totally like you think all the other guys have done that. So therefore, I can also do this type of a model, but it is not going to work at that way because that is what happens, right? So when Netflix come and say that I have a algorithm which can pick up, and then Uber comes and say I can pick up like this, it doesn't going to work for an e-commerce business that way. It is different. So the same model, if you are thinking about that can be done, it is again a problematic. So that is what I see, like how we can sort it out, these type of problems actually in the going into the production level.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people do is, I mean, like you are trying to apply AI for everything. You are trying to develop AI models for everything, but you don't exactly understand the domain. I mean, you are trying to
Correct.
build a machine learning or AI model for, let's say, healthcare industry, but you don't understand the domain or the business that you are applying it for, and you fail. So I think you address that as well. Thanks, Hansa. So now, Dhaminda, back to you with the context given by Ashwini as well. So I think security is very, very important for artificial intelligence. So, so when you are developing applications and developing solutions, how do you apply security to AI and different models? So what are the mechanisms, processes, or techniques that you follow?
Yeah, so Neranjan, now some of the customers, they are very paranoid about their data. So that's a gold mine for them. You feed that into an AI model or whatever the AI agent that is going to, where who's going to consume this data is the question. Can it be opened up to public, or whether it should be controlled? But before the AI agent was implemented, there would have been certain controls that the institution would have had in accessing the data. So the legacy software where you have a login authentication screen, and based on your login, there'll be certain set of data that will be allowed for you to look into. And as you go up the ranks, you might see more information of the company, and those will be very confidential information. But when it comes to a AI model, you tend to kind of open up everything because that has to be trained. So the AI model has to learn. So AI model could kind of not know what your designation is, or might be able to uh, relate some of the confidential information to a user. So how do you kind of control? A good example is there was a law firm where they had all the um, all the information that they have collected over a period of time, and they wanted an AI engine to come in, and the lawyers to kind of look into these data and get a better learning and a quicker learning as well, rather than going through all the books and reading. So they were able to kind of question it, and it was able to give the information then and there. But the question is, they were paranoid about this data being outside. They wanted the system to be installed on an on-prem setup. So they had the servers, everything physically in their premise, so that they guaranteed that the data would not go out. So similarly, they would have done it in a different way, where they would have had a private cloud and done that. So the perception from different people, where do I kind of put this information? Do I put it on a cloud? Do I put it on my own data center? Things like that happen. So there are certain ways of people identifying security. But then again, there are other security measures that people bring in on an enterprise level, where they have their own security framework. Uh, the data is kind of a partition so that the information is well protected. The confidential information is well protected from, and the models are aware of how it is done. Say, for instance, somebody kind of questions what would be my CEO salary. The model should understand who's asking the question and what level that person is, and it kind of filters out. But this is how you wire the entire artificial intelligence apparatus in the enterprise application. So the designer or the architect should know how he should kind of lay out the models, how he should lay out the components so that the information is not missed. And then you need to kind of have a constant monitoring mechanism. That's where the MLOps also comes in, where you keep on enhancing. I mean, there may be slippages that happens at the initial stages that one should be aware of and should put controls in. That's where the models are being fine-tuned and retrained when required. So audit trail to monitoring mechanisms has to be implemented so that that doesn't happen. But at the end of the day, data has to be protected the way it is protected now in a legacy method.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. So you explained the whole process of applying different controls and security with software development process. And I'm sure that to do all these things, you need a multi-skilled cross-functional team, right? And so they need to have engineering skills, design skills, different domain knowledge, etc. So, what kind of cross-functional teams would you require in AI application development, AI model development, or software development, and what are the practices that you have within your company? So, can you enlighten us on that?
Yeah. So, if you look at the resource or the people that are required, there has to be people with good domain knowledge to start with, because one should understand which domain this AI implementation happens. Like if somebody doesn't know the domain, then one has to have a good understanding of the domain, because he has to kind of partition and design the entire system based on that. Then we'll have to look at data scientists who will have to analyze the data. So they will have to work on the data engineers to clean up the data. So that will be a AI and data engineering team that will have to come in. And then the ML engineers would kind of wire up the ML components, putting that together. And while they are doing that, there is a software component that has to go in. The software engineering team has to come in, where they will probably extract data from the databases and feed in the ML models, do up whatever the data engineering stuff that they have to do, the data filtering and all that, user interfaces to be built in so that the users are able to kind of connect with it. And then the security team will have to analyze the security part of it. The quality assurance and testing team will have to work on the security leakages to make sure that the penetration testing is done so that nobody is able to break it in, depending on the implementation, whether it's going to be a public facing implementation or internet level implementation. So quite a sizable team, I would say. But if you look at cross-functional, yeah, there may be certain software engineers who are able to kind of double up as data engineers and software engineers, but then ML is a kind of a specialized area where people have kind of specializing ML components and development of it. So there will be individuals who are specialized in those areas that will kind of contribute to the project. Yep. So that will be the team composition. Cross skilling, yeah, it can happen. It does happen. One thing to note here is now with a lot of software and IT companies using these AI tools to develop software. That's another area that you should look into, because what we were discussing some time back as well as SLASCOM, would the software engineers be called software engineers, tech leads and all that? Or do we go back to the good old age of calling software engineer a software engineer? A software engineer is a multi-talented. Some time ago, they were working on these old legacy languages, but they were called software engineers. And they were a bunch of people who are able to kind of work. But right now, in the modern day, they're very focused on certain areas. But with the AI tools, that's a challenge.
Mm.
Because AI tools are able to kind of, you don't have to be a .NET or a Java engineer. The AI tool will write the code for you, but you need to understand the real concepts, the software engineering concepts well, to understand whether the AI tool gives the right code out. So these are some of the new challenges that are coming in to the teams as well.
Thanks, Dhaminda. So I'll get another question to Hansa maybe later on different tools and platforms that you can use to develop AI applications. But from Dhaminda, so now when we are developing these applications, now we can't forget user experience. It's very, very important. So, I mean, how do you balance user experience with new AI features, new AI developments, and also with different aspects like transparency, bias, ethical considerations, this black box effect, explainability, etc. So how do you balance those aspects with AI development?
All right, so let me start with the user experience point of view. It's interesting to see how the user experience would change because right now, natural language interfaces are becoming very strong and they are becoming very accurate and very human-like. Just imagine a day when the screen is gone and you're just speaking to your computer. A computer may be a box, a watch, or whatever a small object, and it kind of responds back with the information that you want. It's for example's sake, let's say I want to purchase something, right? Right now, I would go to an e-commerce portal, browse through, look for the listing. But just imagine you talking to your application and saying, look, I want to buy this item. These are the specifications. And it responds back saying, look, these are the best-selling items. These the review. You want to know more information about it. It becomes a conversational thing, right? The user experience is as good as you speaking with another colleague or a friend of yours trying to buy, or going to a shop and discussing with the salesperson, trying to kind of get the best product out. So that's where the user experience would head in the future, I believe. I think you can see some of the futuristic things that are coming out from the ex-Apple designer, Johnny. Right? So they're looking at small components, small modules where these are wearable items, right? So that's the future. But coming back to the current tense, the user experience, some of the customers do ask, do I have to kind of dig through all these data? Can I not have a natural language interface? Can you kind of make an application where I could say, please give me this month's sales data, summarize the sales data. I mean, that's the user interface people are looking at. So when that is for internal data, but just imagine if you are to extract data from external sources, like for instance, I would say like compare my SKU item 001 with the rest of the world items. The AI agent crawls onto other websites, extract information, and bring it to you and say, look, these are the comparisons that I've done. Would that be ethical is a question. Would that be within the governance framework is a question. So these are some of the challenges that we will face as this AI thing expands. These are happening out there. People are looking at making things easy. If I go in front of a customer and say, look, I can give you an application that you don't have to worry about the screen digging to report generation to all that. You can just type everything and the system would generate it. They'll love it. They'll jump at it. But how would you kind of get that information out and in an ethical way is a big question mark.
Thanks, Dhaminda. Thank you very much for that explanation. So something that came to my mind while you were speaking as well with the previous question I asked also. Now we see there are a lot of young people who actually want to learn machine learning, AI, etc., and they are very keen on following courses, doing MScs, etc. And that's the younger generation. But there are software engineers who have let's say 10, 12, 15 years of experience who are somewhat mature. So are they really keen on learning these new technologies as well, or is it more with the young people? How do you see that?
I guess the young people are learning. I mean, they learn the new technologies. Yeah. So I would say the existing crowd, they are very much comfortable in what they do.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It's a kind of what do you call a technology track change that they have to do and think different. Even in introducing AI tools for them to develop, they look at you and say, "Look, are you trying to get rid of me or what?" That's the perception that they get. But thing is this: what happens is, like it or not, everybody will have to get on this bandwagon because the rest of the world is getting on it. And they are churning out code faster than what they used to do. It doesn't say that using an AI tool will give you perfect code, because they sometimes give you crap, right? So you need to kind of read through and understand what it does. Otherwise, you're in a big mess. So from the learning point of view, yeah, the younger generation, they are very good at it because they use it from the time they start uni, or they're still in school and they're using it. And they've been using it for their day-to-day work in school as well. But the generation that's already in software industry, they have to adapt into it. So there's a slow progress on that.
Yeah. Thanks, I mean. Yeah, so Hansa, back to you. So now, actually, I missed asking this question from you. Now, we can't, when it comes to artificial intelligence, we can't forget generative AI and large language models. And we know that a few years back, I mean, maybe 2, 3 years back, most of the people have not even heard of AI. But now, with generative AI and LLMs coming into play, and especially with transformer model, and all, so people are talking of AI. And so how do you see these new transformer models or LLMs or generative AI technologies being applied in Sri Lankan context, especially with private enterprises?
Yeah, so everyone now wants to try this out. So that is in their bucket list. Any CXO wants to do that, or CIO or CXO. Okay, so that is a good thing. And then what needs to be done? So I think a bit of a consultancy is needed. So that is where this type of engagement should support many of them, especially on how to select a use case and then how to move forward. Thinking about problems that may come, as Ashwini explained, not to get in the ethical problems and all, right? Yeah, so thinking about that, I think the first kind of people always is the BFSI. So they have many use cases they wanted to try out. So I personally been consulted by several BFSIs. They wanted to have a customer servicing app, very simply, on agentic aspect, right? And then most of our enterprises have websites, and then they have their own chat bubbles there, but they are asking only to a given set of intents. But right now, everyone wants to have their web chat to be smart enough. So that is a good thing that I am seeing. Not only on the BFSI side, but also on like any other industrial domains, right? Everyone wants to have a web chat which is smart. On the Gen AI aspect I'm talking about. And then, so right now people are talking about developing AI roadmap, which is really good on the enterprise side. So where the consultancy is needed. So we should have more kind of these things for them to support as well. So I'm seeing right now, either we take it right now or until 2027, 2028. Otherwise, we would also miss the bus for this time also. but we are very much known to, like our industries in Sri Lanka, very much known to adopt new technologies much faster. So I think they're going to do that. So government is also talking about enabling these things. So that is also good. So I think we will have pretty good time on our enterprises and industries. Very optimistic. That is what I'm saying.
Hansa, can you recommend any tools or frameworks or platforms which can be used for fast prototyping as well as scalable application developments?
Yeah. So I'm saying with my experience, right? So now when I'm given an idea, I definitely create an app. Earlier it took me, like with other words and all, it took me at least 1 month or 2 months or something. But during the weekends, now I build at least 3 apps. Right? So I'm using vibe coding. These are only for the MVPs, not to go into the production scale. These are only for the MVPs, so that the senior leadership get an idea how it is going to be. So I'm using Cursor. So that is basically to polish the code and write it in a proper way. Then I'm using Client as a vibe coding tool. So which is where I always do all the feature enhancements and feature developments for new apps, novel apps, ideation part. And when I need to, like, so I can do the technical part, right? So, but I'm not a UI UX expert. So when I need a UI UX thing, I go to builder.io, right? So builder.io basically gives you a very, very nice output on a mobile interface or a web interface, right? So that is very easy for me to get in touch. And then if I want to have an app with some with to showcase, right, and integrating part, so I'm trying to do with the cursor level things. So I don't, if I want to use a LLM where my machine is not enough, and then I need to have inferencing kind of engine where I cannot invest for a like $200-300 machine. So I go for Grok, GROQ, right? It is so GROK is the one that people are using. I'm using GROQ, which you have the inferencing engine. So you can do your LLMs much faster, fraction of a second. You can do that. So I'm talking about on the backend side using Cursor, client kind of things. Front end side, Streamlit, Builder.io, right, Gradio kind of things. And then on the inferencing aspect, Grok kind of thing. So very simply, you can have an app within 2 to 3 hours.
So you mentioned you said that you are developing 3 apps in a weekend, right?
Yeah.
Okay, your
Every
wife must
week.
be hating you, I'm sure.
So very much. So I would say, like, another example. I saw a YouTube video where a 7-year-old kid talking about agentic AI by doing vibe coding, and he has a calling app also. So yeah, so it is pretty interesting time to be.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I mean, you can develop an enterprise grade application within 2-3 hours of time. I mean, yeah, it's a huge and drastic change in software development and how people work. So Ashwini, so I have kept you waiting for a very long time, but yeah, so when adapting these new technologies, so Dhaminda and Hansa explained a lot of different models, different frameworks, technical frameworks and process, etc. Now, when you are doing all these things in enterprise and public environments, so leaders and policy makers play a huge role. So what are the roles that these leaders and policymakers can play when establishing digital trust with related to artificial intelligence and machine learning, etc. And what are the steps they can take to ensure that right controls and policies and frameworks are established?
Sure. Basically, when we look at governance, we are not only looking at the government policies that are in place, but we also
Correct.
look at ones that are being done at a company level, at private organizations, at industry level. For example, SLASCOM working on matters like this are also very, very important. So industry-led bodies. All of these are extremely important in the entire rubrics when it comes to governance. So each of these play a very, very crucial and important role. At the apex level, when we talk about national level regulations and rules. They play an important role to set the standard of what really is expected. And these are not just codes that, are based on consensus or based on soft law, so to speak. So that has its own requirements, and that is efficacy in its own way. And then we also have these voluntary codes through industry-led bodies like SLASCOM, for example, that can also go a long way in making sure that there is co-regulation. We are not entirely only depending on what the state is doing in terms of regulating this, but industry in itself has certain standards that they are adopting. And we also have at enterprise level, at a organization level, where they adopt their own standards. And we've seen that in many big tech companies where they have their own responsible AI principles that they have adopted. For example, Microsoft has its own that you can see. All of these are various types through which we can establish trust. But you've asked me what are the roles that must be played by policymakers and by these governance mechanisms. And the role, I think, is essentially to set standards in terms of groundwork. These should be done, and what can be done while deploying, while building these AI systems. Now that's needed, and we have several of that existing. But the point is, how are we going to implement that? So as the other panelists were saying, when we are building these systems, there are so many considerations that this probably becomes one at, much below in the list. And they think that once everything works out, then we can look at it. But this should also be considered a high priority and not something that's low end only because of the fact that perhaps this may not work. Then why are we considering about it right now? That should not be how the company should approach it. And to enable that, that's when policy becomes very important, because policy creates, when it comes to policies by the state, that creates a certain momentum in the entire country where everybody is focused on how it can be complied with and how it can be proceeded with. And it can certainly be in the form of a legislation. It can be in the form of a strategy through which there is an advisory committee, and the advisory committee gives out guidelines. So, for example, the National AI Strategy calls for a National AI Center to be established. And it also talks of a body of experts who will be established, who will be formed, and who will be giving advisory opinions. All of this can go a long way in creating that kind of consensus when it comes to compliance, and that compliance attitude, and to bring about the culture of compliance. All of these are little bricks in that entire structure, is how I view it. And the other thing that I think needs a lot of focus is on the fact that we have existing regulations through, for example, fully automated decision making, how we approach it from a PDPA angle. It's already there. So if we can look at those and amplify those, that will also go a long way, instead of only thinking of what we have to have, but also the existing ones. Compliance should not be forgotten. I think in a nutshell, I believe these are extremely important. And also, when it comes to regulation, my personal opinion is having sector specific ones, especially for AI, is crucial, as opposed to a broad brush when it comes to how this is going to be looked at. Sector specific regulations based on use cases will go a long way in bringing precision to this governance structure or the framework that we want to have.
Yeah, I think one of the things that certain countries are adopting, Ashwini, is that this thing called a regulatory sandbox, where
Yes.
you actually, I mean, okay, let me throw it as a question to you. Now, the thing is, now when we are trying to apply these frameworks, regulations, and different controls with innovation, sometimes we limit innovation, and we don't allow people to develop things and freely. So how do you achieve the balance between innovation and ethical considerations, regulations, and different controls while allowing innovation to happen? I mean, especially in very fast-moving industries like fintech. So how do we achieve that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question, because many times when we talk about regulation, it's always considered as, regulation and innovation are mutually exclusive. I don't believe in that at all. I think we can certainly build a system that is compliant as well as that is innovative. But your question is very pertinent, because examples have been seen in our day-to-day lives as to how innovation has been extremely increasing in countries that have a soft touch approach to regulation that cannot be denied, more so in those countries as opposed to those that are very regulatory heavy. Having said that, one way is definitely having a regulatory sandbox, but at a pilot stage, right? So that may not be entirely useful for a lot of people because they may say that's only for a limited time period. And how are we going to achieve better progress without only at the point of like piloting, if you're going to have a regulatory sandbox, and then, you know, when we full-fledged deploy, we still have to comply. So that may also come with some pushback. So some suggestions from my end can be this governance structure and the compliance structure should be based on risks, because it cannot be the same for all types of AI uses and AI use cases. It cannot be the same for an AI recommender system, for example, on YouTube and on our social media, again, using AI, to that is being used by a healthcare provider. So the risk-based approach is essential, and that can really go into helping with innovation. So we make sure that we are not stifling innovation. At the same time, for startups and for small companies that are building AI systems, certainly there can be certain mechanisms through which they are able to innovate. And then we are able to see how we can consider adoption at a large scale level by making sure that there is compliance. So I can give you a parallel. So in the data protection legislation in India, there is something called the startup exemption, where from the personal data protection regulations, certain startups are able to get certain types of exemptions. Now, that can be similar to what you have suggested in terms of a regulatory sandbox for ensuring that at the point of starting these innovative ideas, nobody should be stifled on the basis of very cumbersome regulations. So yes, they can be considered, but at the end of the day, large scale deployment will certainly require compliance, and that balance can be achieved by making sure we consider the risks, at the same time looking at how compliance should not just become a burden, and this will make sure that only the big players are coming in. So I'm very mindful of that. That doesn't mean only big tech companies can comply with this, only they will be able to come into these areas of innovation. Smaller companies and startups should be able to contribute, and for that, a regulatory system through which they are able to flourish has to be established, definitely based on risk, and definitely it can also be for certain time periods where we can have exemptions, and moving forward how we can implement it in a phased manner. I think these are some of the areas that I think can help.
Yes, so we should basically see these controls and regulations not as blockers, but as enablers, which allow us to actually innovate within a confined space without letting these technologies go out of control. And yes, and Ashwini, so you are a board member of public listed large company in Sri Lanka, and you work with a lot of senior people in the industry. So how open do you think these senior leaders are for these new technologies and ethical considerations? And are they willing to learn these things? Are they willing to adopt these new governance structures? And are they willing to incorporate these within their corporate policies? So
yes, again, a very pertinent and relevant topical question that you have asked. Certainly, in my own experience, I can see that there is willingness, and none of the IT teams or development teams have shied away when these questions have been asked. So at a board level committee, I always raise questions on whenever AI models are being used or when they're going to be deployed, and that is being met with the seriousness that it ought to be. And so that's a very, very encouraging feature. But outside of big companies, there are also several smaller entities that are working on AI, and they need the guidance that is not always available to them. And I feel that is where we can definitely, there is a gap that can be looked at and that we have to fill. And it's very interesting because if you see the national AI strategy, they speak about capacity building and they speak about training, because that is a serious concern. Now, but how are we going to bridge these gaps? That's again a question that we all have to ask, because that requires a certain funding that is not always available, and that also requires human resources that may not also be available easily in the country. And there are also several experts that we lack in certain areas. So these are some of the questions that, while we know that this is the ideal way to go, we also have to consider how we are going to achieve, how we are going to implement them. So yes, certainly I see there is willingness, but at the same time, I also see that there is certain compliance burden that they will see, because it comes at a cost. And how are these costs going to be managed? That also should be considered, and particularly from the point of view of skills development and upscaling of existing employees. All of these are again concerns that we ought not to forget about. And there is always a line, an adage that I personally really like, and it says that ethics isn't a constraint, but it is a competitive edge. And I really liked that phrase because of the fact that it gives importance to the fact that yes, innovation is essential, but ethics is not going to make you any less an innovator just because you're taking that. And I try to pitch that to the boards and to all the senior management I meet during discussions.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashwini. And you mentioned one thing about skill gap and how we are going to address this skill gap. And I think SLASCOM is doing a lot of work with respect to that area, trying to develop the skills within Sri Lanka, and even we in Digital Trust Alliance are developing certain courses and training programs which will help our young people to develop these skills as well. Okay, so now I think we have ran out of time, and so I will maybe throw one last question to each and every one of you. So what's the advice that you can give to anyone, a developer, so board directors, so anyone in the industry or who's willing to learn or anything? What are the advices that you can give? So what are the key takeaways that you can provide? So I'll start with Hansa.
So from advice kind of thing, like I would say it is recommend kind of a suggestion. So right now, the developing an application or a solution is not a team, not a work of a separate team. So now my CEO comes with a Figma screen and say, what do you think? And then my product manager comes with a full app and say how we can scale this up. Right. So that is the level that is been. So my suggestion would be to get used to these AI tools. There are many. So find out what good for you, but more or less try to become a logic designer with identifying how to give a proper prompt. So that is what I would like to say.
Thanks, Hansa. Dhaminda?
Yeah, so I believe AI is here to stay. There's no way out of it. So how you select AI is always be cautious about it. Cautious in the sense not to kind of have every AI tool out there in the market and call yourself an AI expert. So there are certain governance or conditions that they kind of spell out, saying how they use data, because you might be conversing some sensitive topic, which might be on the other side be used for training, or it might go out into the public, right? So you have to be kind of mindful of what you're doing with the AI tool. If it might be a simple chat that you're having just to get an opinion. So there are the AI tool rules and regulations, the compliances, all that has to be kind of looked into if it is on a corporate base. Learning, of course, a lot of things are there. There are many ways of learning, but young engineers have to kind of learn how to use the AI tools. Probably prompt engineering will be a key point as well for them to work on. So simply, AI is to stay here, and don't be a slave of AI. Make AI your slave.
Exactly. Thanks, Dhaminda. Ashwini?
Quickly, I don't believe that any technology is good or bad. It's the humans who are associated with it who really make the difference. at the end of the day, I really believe that this can be very useful, but it's up to us to use it in the manner that is ethical, that is also compliant with the requirements of good governance when it comes to AI. So I would say in a nutshell, yes, by all means, when you're coming up with any innovations, including when it comes to AI innovations, consider the principles of governance before you get into it. And that will really go a long way.
Natashan. I think from the day the universe started, I think it has always been a battle between good and bad. So even with AI, I think it would be the same. It will definitely be a battle between good and bad, and we should hope that the good will win without making the world rather Terminator movie. So, anyways, thank you very much, everyone. I love the conversation with you guys, and I learned a lot as well. And thanks a lot for being a part of Digital Trust Alliance's third webinar on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And have a great evening and a great night. And thanks again for being a part of this great panel conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.